Well, hello there. My goodness, it is so good to see you all tonight. I don't get a whole lot of visitors. I presume probably having passed away 182 years ago this past August may have something to do with my slight social schedule. But it's good to see you tonight. And well, as you can tell, when I have company, I get so excited I even forget to introduce myself. My name is Dr. Simon Morgan Settles, MD. And it is good to have you tonight. But now, if you don't mind me being a little presumptuous, I know exactly why you're here. You are here for the same reason everybody who comes to see me is here. You want to know about the rifles. You want to know about the Settles rifles. Everyone asks the same question. Tell us about the Settles rifles. And so I'll tell you about the rifles tonight. But I want you to understand that the rifles are just a small part of a much larger story about an even bigger family. And really, if you get down to it, the story of our family and the story of the rifles is the story of America. For instance, my great-great-grandfather, Francis Settles, was the one who came to America first. In 1657, he came to Virginia, settled in Fauquier County, right there around Richmond. And he came and did well. Now, I said his name was Francis. That's true. His name was Francis, but no one ever called him Francis. As a matter of fact, everybody who knew him called him Posthumus. Posthumus Settles. And the story goes, the reason they called him Posthumus is that he was born about 2 months after his daddy died. And so everyone said, there's the posthumous son of Thomas Settles. And from then on, he was known as Posthumus Settles. Now, how would you like to have a name like Posthumus? There goes Posthumus walking down the road there. And that's what they called him, Posthumus Settles. But now, Posthumus did well in Virginia. He was a tobacco planter, had plantations, he had orchards, he had flocks, he had herds, he had distilleries, and he did very well for himself. As a matter of fact, his sons did well. His grandsons, his great-grandsons, and they were very successful in Virginia. And then in 1800, things changed. See, in 1800, my mama passed away, Mary Morgan Settles. And my daddy, George Isaac Settles, who thought of himself as a real young man in 1800, a man in his mid-60s, decided it was time for a new start. He was going to sell out everything he had there in Virginia, and he was going to move to the wild west of Kentucky. And he did. Sold everything. Sold his plantation, sold his 2 distilleries, everything he couldn't readily move, and off to the wilds of Kentucky he came. And I came with him, a young medical doctor about 20 years old. My brother William came too. And we came to what is now Barren County, Kentucky. Now, Daddy settled, if you know where this is, Daddy settled at Buck Creek. Matter of fact, he bought the 1,000 acres around the 2 caves that make up the mouth of Buck Creek, and he set up his tobacco plantation there, set up a distillery there, right down off of the Young Road. As a matter of fact, if you go down over the bluff there today, right past where the Sportsman's Club is now, you can still see the foundation stones of the old distillery and the old mill there. If you don't mind hacking your way through the weeds and copperhead snakes don't bother you, you can go right down there today and it's still there. And Daddy prospered there, so much so that in 1820, when my father, George Isaac Settles, passed away, it took us 2 weeks to have the auction sale to sell his estate. The newspaper wrote up the story. People came from western Kentucky, they came from Virginia, and for 2 weeks we auctioned off his estate. One of the newspaper accounts wrote about how my brother-in-law, one of my sister's husband from Virginia, came. And the newspaper reported how that he bought a bay mare, a herd of swine, and a slave boy. And he rode the bay mare back to Virginia, and that poor young man had to drive the hogs on foot from Buck Creek all the way to Virginia. Can you imagine driving hogs from Buck Creek, Kentucky to Virginia? But Daddy did well. Now, my brother William, he set up a farm at Gain, Kentucky. I believe you all call it Old Rocky Hill. And he set up his farm there, and after he got his farm set up, he looked around and thought that desperately we needed a rifle making works. You see, there was no one making rifles at that time here in Barren County, and you needed a rifle. Now, when I say this was the wilds of the West, it really was. Barren County is not the place that you know now, or it wasn't at that time, the place that you know now of well-manicured lawns and fenced-in pasture fields. You see, when we came in 1800, the cane brakes were so large that a man could get lost for weeks if he was ever seen again. The pea vine was so tall that it was higher than a man's head when he sat on horseback. There were bears that were still plentiful here. There were mountain lions. There were the buffalo that were still here. And that's not even counting the bands of Native Americans, of Indians that would roam through on their annual hunting trips through what they called Kankakee at the time. Sometimes they were friendly and sometimes they weren't. Just to the north of us, the British were still hiring bands of Indians to come through and look for white scalps. They definitely weren't friendly. And so you had to have a good rifle. You had to be proficient with it. You had to have a dependable rifle. And William thought this was a good business to go into, and he was right, it was. See, William was good at metalwork. He had learned that from Mama's side of the family, the Morgans in Virginia. And so he set up his rifle making business there and was successful. He made rifles. His son Felix went into the business with him. Felix's son Simon, named after his favorite uncle, of course, he went into the business too. My son, John Morgan Settles, he was in the rifle making business with them, and they did well. And from 1800 till about 1840, they made flintlock rifles. Then in 1840, the technology changed. They started making percussion cap rifles and did even better with the percussion cap rifles for the next 10 years or so. And then in 1850, the market kind of dried up. There was no longer the demand for the rifles. There were stores everywhere in every community and several in Glasgow, and they could buy in bulk and undercut the local rifle makers, and there just wasn't the market that there used to be. So one morning they woke up and they looked around and they had a wagon load of rifles and no market for them. And my great-nephew Willis, he come up with the idea, we're going to load up a wagon load of rifles and we're going to head west and we're going to go until we can find a place to sell these. And he did. And west he went. And when I say he went west, I mean he went west. He went so far as he had to cross the Mississippi River and go to that God-forsaken land called Arkansas. Now, I know it's a God-forsaken land because when he got back with the money from selling the rifles, he raised his hand to heaven and said, I'll never go back to that God-forsaken land called Arkansas again. Until about 2 years later when he went back to Arkansas and lived there the rest of his life. He was a rather fickle young man. But the rifle business was over. They took the money and they went into various concerns. Some opened stores, some went into farming, some went into the lumber business. As a matter of fact, my son, John Morgan Settles, Jack, he went into the lumber business. His grandson, James M., was in the lumber business with him. His son, Paul Lee, and they did very well in the lumber business. That wasn't the end of the family story, and it wasn't the end of the rifle story either. There were still stories that bounded about all these rifles that were out there. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, the best of the rifle stories come from my son Jack, John Morgan Settles. Now, if you have children, you know, especially if you have boys like I do, you know that in every family there's always that one boy that, God bless him, does not have to look for trouble. He can stand there flat-footed and mind his own business and trouble will find him. That was my son Jack. Well, I remember one time during the 1860s, I'm sure y'all know about all the turmoil of the 1860s, right? The big war that was going on. You know, the war between the Republicans and the Democrats when they were shooting at each other. I don't know if y'all still have Republicans and Democrats, but I hope they get along better than they did in the 1860s. Right? But they were shooting at each other back then. And Jack comes home to his farm in Railton, Kentucky one day, riding his horse. He comes home and he finds out that a group of Union soldiers have come through and they have requisitioned, that means taken without paying for, his horses. Well, Jack, not being one to be put upon, he gets his rifle, jumps on the only horse he's got left, and heads out after them down the old Bowling Green Road towards Glasgow and catches up with them at the crossroads at Red Cross. He jumps off his horse, he runs up to the soldiers, he levels his Settles rifle at them, and he tells them he's there for his horses. They laugh at him and say, there's 12 of us, there's only one of you. What in the world are you going to do with your single-shot rifle? So Jack cocks his piece and he tells them he allows how he can take one of them with him before he goes. And after pondering that a moment, they decide that's not a price they're willing to pay for such few head of horses. And they let him have his horses back and back off to home. He rides with his rifle and his horses. But now the best story is in the 1870s when Jack's a much older man. He finds himself, for reasons that we won't talk about in public, raising some of his grandchildren. And there was a young man in the community there at Railton that fell madly in love with one of those granddaughters. And he wanted to court that young lady, but the problem was he was a coward. And I'm sure you've never had that issue. But he was afraid to go ask Granddaddy for permission to date this granddaughter. So he did what any self-respecting young man of the time would do. He went and bought himself a jar of liquid courage. And once he had sufficiently floated away his inhibitions, he staggered up to Jack's house. And in the middle of the night, knocks on the door, Jack comes to the door with his coal oil lantern, opens the door, and there's this young man staggering in the doorway. And he announces his intentions to court this granddaughter. And Jack tells him how he doesn't allow that's a good idea, especially in his condition, and it makes the young man mad. And he begins pummeling on Jack right there in the doorway, just wailing on him. Well, Jack, being Jack, reaches behind the door and grabs his Settles rifle and boom! Shoots the young man right in the chest. And instead of dutifully falling over dead, he runs off. And Jack made the papers again because 2 weeks later the newspaper reported how the young man had survived his ordeal, the bullet not having hit any vital innards. Now, I don't know about you, but as a medical doctor I can assure you that all of my innards are vital to me. But the young man survived nonetheless. Now, I hope history will judge us positively for the contribution we made to our little part of Barren County over there in the western part. Whether it be providing goods and services or farming or influencing our neighbors, I trust that history will judge us well for that. But there is one last thing, one other thing that we are awful proud of. There's one way that the Settles family, we're still influencing our part of Barren County to this day. You see, in the 1800s, in the early 1800s, there was a Methodist campground about 6 miles out of Glasgow down the old Bowling Green Road at a place called Old Zion. And the Methodist circuit riders would come through, the preachers would come through, and they would hold these big, long, protracted meetings, these big, long revival meetings, last for weeks at a time. And people would camp out and they would minister to the souls that were there, and it was a wonderful work. And they did that for years. And in 1859, a group of families from the Railton, Red Cross, Rocky Hill, Beckton area, they decided they wanted to form a more permanent work out of that. And in 1859, they founded Old Zion Methodist Episcopal Church South, as it was known at that time, the mother church of all Methodist churches in Barren County. And our Settles family was part of that group, right? We were part of those families. And that congregation is still going on, still doing strong today, and it's ministering to the physical and spiritual needs of that community and doing very well. And if I might say this and not sound too terribly prideful, my 5th great-grandson has been the pastor of that church for several years, still to this day. And so we're proud of that fact that we've had a positive effect on our community. But you've listened to an old spirit ramble long enough, and you have other things to do, and I must go too. But before I go, let me leave you with this. Please, before you shuffle off this mortal coil and come to see me on my side of the veil, make sure that you have done something of lasting and eternal value in the place where you live, so that when you come to see me, those who have known you will definitely say that you have left something behind to have bettered the life and bettered the lot of the place where you live too. All right? You all have a good evening. And thank you for coming to see me.
Thank you for giving me the honor of speaking to you tonight for a few minutes. I'm Irving G. Houchins. I'm going to try to, in 15 minutes, give you some life experiences that I gained over 90-some years and approximately 70-plus years of business experiences. We'll start at the beginning. I was born December the 16th, 1897, approximately 14 miles from Glasgow in rural Barren County, in an area that was then known as Lucas Precinct. I was one of 10 children. My mother was Lisa Ann Woodcock, my father Hardin Houchins, and we were tenant farmers on my Uncle Jack Britt's farm. I was a few weeks old, and one of my cousins, 12-year-old my Uncle Jack's 12-year-old son, came to visit and asked my mother, "What did you name him?" She stated, "Irvin." "Well, you should have named him Tut." My mother inquired, "Why Tut? That's our mule's name." Well, little did I know that stuck. I was known as Tut to everybody that knew me from that point on in life. We lived there in a small cabin until 1903. When I was 6 years old, we bought a small tract of land 3 miles closer to Glasgow, and I worked on the farm, and when that work was done, I'd work on other farms in the area to make money. I thought I wanted to be a farmer, so my intent was to buy a tract of land of my own. When I was about 15 or 16, I bought a team of mules or horses and a wagon, and was going to use those as my first purchase for the farm. When I was 18 years old, there was a farm that was coming for auction about 1.5 miles from us. It was an estate. I had $375, and my intent was to buy that farm. But the brother of the deceased who owned the farm was living there, and he ended up buying the farm, so I figured it was fate. I wasn't going to get that farm, and maybe not another farm. But shortly after that, my father was going into town south of Glasgow at Pritchard's store to buy some supplies, and all the neighbors began calling up, have Harden bring this, have him bring that, have him bring this. Okay, fine. So as he started off with the team of horses and the wagon, she opened the screen door and yelled back out to him, so-and-so called, she needs this or they need that. And his response was, what do I look like, a team of horses and a wagon? And a light bulb went off in my head. That's what I was going to do. I was going to take orders from the neighborhood, go into town and pick up their supplies, and I was going to be in business for myself. Well, after a little research and talking to the neighbors, it quickly came to mind that that everybody didn't need supplies at the same time. I was going to be making a lot of trips in and out of town. So I decided I was not going to do that, but I thought I'll open a store. In those days, every little community had a store because the only way of transportation was by horseback, horse and buggy, a team of horses and a wagon, or walk. We did not have a store. It was about 3 miles to the nearest store, and it was a small little store. So I began working on opening a store. My parents said that's the wrong thing to do. You don't need to do that. But I went ahead, and my brother and I went to the sawmill about 2 miles away and bought $75 worth of flat boards, and we built a small building that was going to be my store. That was in the spring of 1916. I went into town that fall and talked to some grocery wholesalers about what I would need to start a store. How much money do you have, Irvin? I said, well, I have about $300. Well, let's get you a list, see what we can do. So they went through the process and gave me a long list of what I needed to start my store. And okay, how much is this going to cost me? $300. That was a coincidence, but I had the $300, so I said, order it. That's what I want. They said, come back in about 3 weeks and we'll have your order. So I went back in, and it actually took 2 wagon loads bringing back to my little store for $300. I stocked it fully and began being a storekeeper. I worked on the farm during the week. My sister Beth ran the store, and then on Saturdays, I ran the store all day. This went on for about a year and a half. We were doing pretty good. I was running back and forth to the wholesalers and buying groceries. But I decided the war was going on. I decided I was going to join the Navy. So I came into town and got all my paperwork together and made my application. And they were going to send me to Louisville. So I sell out my whole store, everything in the building. I sold to the nearest storekeeper, the Rigdons, and I closed the store down. I went to Louisville. They bused me to Louisville, got me to Louisville, and we went into the Navy recruiter, laid down my application. He said, well, Mr. Houchins, I'm sorry, as of yesterday, the Navy's not taking anybody else. Maybe the Army will take you, but you're going to have to go on back to Barren County. So I had to pay my own way back to Barren County, and I decided before I went back, I was going to see if I could get a job there. I went to the wholesale grocers all up and down in Louisville. Nobody was hiring, but I made some good contacts. I came on back, took my merchandise back from the Rigdons, and at that time, he had stated he was going to close his store down. He was getting old, so I bought his inventory. Didn't have quite enough room to put it in my little store building, but I made it do, and I decided from that point I needed a bigger store. So I bought 2 acres at the crossroads, and again, Buford, my brother, and I built another store building, a lot bigger. Moved all my merchandise in there and set up shop. That was in the fall of 1919, and decided that I was going to add a lot of merchandise to the store. I added some farm equipment and plow points and that type of thing, but my biggest deal was poultry. I bought chickens from all over the place. They bring their chickens, their turkeys in, and I would trade for merchandise in the store and give them money. And at that day and time, we carried all the credit till the tobacco crop sold. But I could buy up the chickens in the middle of the summer, and I could sell them to a gentleman in Scottsville, and he distributed them elsewhere. A large load of chickens would be $75 to $100. That's more than profit than I can make in the store building 2 or 3 months, 4 months, 5 months sometimes. So I wanted to do more of the poultry, and that's what we did. For about a year in there, that was my main goal. I did some farming and ran that store, and then I met and married Eloise Bradshaw in 1920, spring of 1920, and we had our first child and only child, Cavella, in 1921. We ran that store. We had to add on to it to get bigger living quarters. We had lived there and worked in that store till spring of 1928. And at that time, I was doing more farming than storekeeping. My wife was running the store, and I didn't make it to the market to buy all the overalls and all the fabric and stuff that I normally would bought. However, it worked out as fate for me because everything sort of crashed that year. All the storekeepers had bought up. They couldn't sell what they'd bought. And instead of me buying from the wholesalers in the fall of that year at half price of what it was, I bought the storekeepers all around me because they were shutting their doors. And at that time, Henry Ford was selling a lot of trucks and a lot of cars. I had a Ford truck that I transported my chickens in, and I thought that things were changing. That was the beginning of the end of the little country stores, because people used to pass on their horses and buggies and stop and buy and visit, but now they were passing in their cars and trucks going on into Glasgow and other places to shop and buy. So that fall, I traded my store and all the inventory to a gentleman that owned the farms out in Falling Creek, Falling Timber, and Burkesville Road. I ended up with over 700 acres to take care of and went back in the farming business. And that went pretty good for about 2 years. Then I had a bad farming accident, and I thought it was the handwriting on the wall. I wasn't made to be a farmer, maybe, after all. So I ended up selling the land, came back into Glasgow, and was going to open a store in Glasgow. And at that time, there was one large grocery chain. Everybody else was small groceries, and they were all going out of business. The big chain was putting them out of business. And everybody warned me, no, they'll put you out of business. Well, why can they put me out of business? Well, they can buy in bulk. Well, I can buy in bulk too. So in 1931, I opened the first store in town in Glasgow, and I began buying truckloads of all the items that we needed and breaking them down, such as potatoes. We break them down into 5-pound bags, and we're selling them for what the other storekeepers were buying them for. And that was the beginning of our expansion. We would buy larger quantities, and break them down into smaller quantities to give our customers a better price. 1936 came, and we got out of the credit business. We weren't going to carry you if you bought from us. We had about 22,000 on the books. We collected all but about 8,500, and in 1936 that was a lot of money. But it turned out we could expand by not having credit, And but by the way, that fall, that large chain went out of Glasgow. We put them out of business. From that time forward, we ended up in the 70s with 51 stores in southern Kentucky, northern Tennessee. We had 5 family stores, 2 shopping centers, and the way that we expanded our business was buying in bulk, plus we started specialty labeling. There was a company that was called Specialty Brands that would bottle and can items for these large name brand companies. They came to me and asked me if they could bottle and can merchandise for us under a label of our own. We started, the first thing we did was coffee, and it was named after my daughter, Cavella. We had Cavella coffee brands, and we could set it next to Maxwell House, Folgers, all the big companies, some of which this company packaged for them, and we could sell it for as much as 25% lower. So our customers got almost the same product for a lot less. Went on with better brands, was flour, sugar, and then we had our specials, everything from salad dressing to canned goods. But to shorten the story down, and I left this to last, in 1945, I set up what's called the Houchins Foundation. I took 5% of the profits from all of our stores and put it back into the Houchins Foundation to give back to the communities that gave to us. And until this day, churches, other organizations get a check from us every year. That has been going on since 1945. So I guess the end of the story, or the moral of the story, is if all of you will treat your neighbors like you'd like to be treated and be the best you can be, you'll be rewarded, because I was rewarded in my business and in my personal life because of my giving. Thank you for showing up tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you for coming, and welcome to Strader's Dairy. I really hope you do enjoy your visit. I mean, after all, it is pretty famous around these parts, and you know, I grew up around Strader's Dairy. You see, I'm Sonia, the leading lady. She'll be here in just a little bit. She's been pretty busy today. Some of you may remember Strader's Dairy from your youth. Well, but then again, you may not. Strader's Dairy on Rural Route 3 in Glasgow. It's not the city of Glasgow. As a matter of fact, it is Hinesville, Kentucky. Are you familiar with Hinesville? I grew up about a mile from Strader's Dairy, and I remember stories about the dairy and, well, the brothers who owned the dairy. Perhaps maybe you or your parents even have drank chocolate milk from the dairy as children in school, or you've eaten the ice cream, or perhaps you've drank the lemonade, and even you may have tried the custard. It's still around during the holidays, and it's, well, our leading lady's own personal recipe. But enough of me. I'm just here to visit just like you. Without further ado, I'll go get our Miss Annie. One moment. Again, she's been very busy. Miss Annie? Miss Annie? You have company? Oh, just give me one. Okay. Oh, hello. I wasn't expecting company, so this very late in the afternoon, and after all, it is payday. You've caught me quite busy. But since you're here, if you don't mind me completing a few tasks while we talk, then come on over. I mean, are you from the bank? The Hinesville Deposit Bank? No? Well, and if you are, my husband Brian, he will be here to see you a little later in the week. Oh, I'm Miss Annie, But if you're from the bank, I'm Mrs. Strader. You see, my husband Brian, he's off to Lexington this week with our son Brownie, to visit a very prominent lawyer by the name of John Brown Sr. He once worked with congressmen in Washington, D.C. He's famous, you know. And, you know, being as it is the Great Depression, and, you know, folks around here, they are quite concerned about their farms and their businesses and what might be happening, but not me. Brian, he'll take care of it. He takes care of everything. Well, the business part of the farm anyway. You see, I take care of the farm. After all, I do run it, but don't tell Brian that. I work right alongside my sons and my farm hands. It's been very busy. As a matter of fact, well, before I go into that, have you seen the farm? Isn't it lovely? I mean, look, the 2 buildings over there, those are ours. And then there's the silo behind me. That's ours. And of course, there's the smokehouse, and we do enjoy that. And then there's the house. Isn't it a lovely color of brown? Brian, he mixed the paint himself. I'm so proud of Brian. And the house, it was a gift to us. Well, the blueprint anyway, from a very nice architect who lives in Louisville, Kentucky. You do know where Louisville is, don't you? It's about a day away. Anyways, the house is very modern for its time. So modern indeed that it has 2 stories, an upstairs, and well, then it does have a basement. The basement, I do love the basement. After all, it is where my kitchen is. It's also where I hide my Coca-Colas, you see. The grandchildren, they certainly do love Coca-Cola. Well, as much as I do, so that's why I keep it hidden. It's also where I keep the biscuits, and the grandchildren, they certainly do enjoy the biscuits. They tell me they taste like cookies. I'm not sure why. I mean, I don't make them any old way. I mean, just regular, I guess. But, you know, grandchildren and grandma's cooking, they certainly do love it. But, you know, they love Lily's cooking too. And, well, speaking of Lily, the quarters over here that is attached to the house, well, that's where Lily lives. Lily, she's a very fine woman. She helps me with all the household chores. If it wasn't for Lily, well then, I certainly wouldn't be able to work out on the farm. For instance, just this morning, there were the goats that needed to be fed, and then there was the chickens, and of course I feed those because they're mine, the chickens and the goats. And well, then there was work to be done in the farm and in the barn. Just this morning, we were making cottage cheese. And don't you know they tried to start without me? I'm in charge of the cottage cheese production. It has to be of the finest quality. I supervise that because we sell it locally, along with the milk. People sure do enjoy the milk. Brian, he delivers it locally, of course, in mason jars. We have to sanitize those and clean those as well. And then there's the custard. My family, they certainly do love my custard. After all, it is my recipe. It's sold locally as well, and have you tried it? It's a local favorite, especially around the holidays. I envision that one day it might be sold somewhere other than Highsville. That would be a grand idea. Oh, and then there's the garden. The rose garden. Aren't the roses lovely? I certainly do enjoy working out in the rose garden when and if I have time. And then there's the vegetable garden. It's rather large, But then again, it did feed the entire family this year, including the tenants and some of the farm hands. You see, on our farm, not only do we work together, but we all live here together as well. And the children, they play together. And speaking of the children, where are those grandchildren? Oh, you finally did show up. You do realize you need to be home before the sun goes down, right? Anyway, oh, it is payday, and here come the farm hands. They're going to want to be paid at any moment. I've been stuffing envelopes. You know, they make $2 a day in cash. A very good wage for a very, very hard days of work. I've been out there working right beside them. You see, here on our farm, blacks and whites, they all make $2 a day. We're very fair. It doesn't matter who you are. We all make the same here. Oh, where are my manners? Would you like a glass of milk? I can get some ice. I do find milk tastes so much better when it's poured over ice. I would offer you a Coca-Cola, but the truck hasn't ran yet. And those grandchildren, they've done went and found my hiding place. I'm going to have to find another. See, the Coke truck, it runs right up to my house. Thank goodness. I'd probably be way too busy to go and try to find some. I would offer you a biscuit as well, but being as it is this late in the evening, the grandchildren, they've all eaten those, and, well, here come the farm hands. I hope you've enjoyed your visit, and come again and see me soon. Well, maybe later, rather than soon.
All right, y'all, good evening. Greetings. I'm Willa B. Brown Chappelle, and I was born right here in Glasgow, Kentucky. And it's not often that I get back here to Glasgow, Kentucky, because my life up north keeps me extremely busy. I had to have notes because I just stay so busy. It's so much to keep up with. Growing up here, I'd occasionally visit family, and the family that I visited were kids, and they have grown and retired, and now they have kids and grandkids of their own. Time goes way too fast. You'll blink and be my age, or I had no children of my own, but because I had no children, it was important to me to leave a lasting legacy that was bigger than myself, that was greater than myself, that would inspire generations to come. So thank you for gathering here today to allow me to tell you a bit about myself, and I hope that my legacy inspires you. I was born, like I said, right here in Glasgow, Kentucky on January the 22nd, 1906, to Reverend Eric B. Brown and Miss Hallie Mae Carpenter. But I grew up a little further north in Terre Haute, Indiana. I graduated from high school in Terre Haute as well. And after I graduated from high school, I went on to pursue my teacher's degree at Indiana Teachers College. I graduated from Teachers College and I went on to teach at Roosevelt High School in Gary, Indiana. You guys know where Michael Jackson's from. So I taught there and was the youngest high school teacher at 21 years of age there. And I was really excited because I'm an educator first. So I was excited to have this job as a high school teacher and was excited to work with kids, you guys' age, and pumped to be with them all day. And unfortunately, the school closed down with the Great Depression. But you know what they say, when one door closes, another door opens. And that door opened for me, and I ventured over to Chicago, the big city. And I was excited to be at the big city of Chicago, and I made some new friends that reminded me of some goals that I had when I was little. When I was little, I was interested in flying. I used to like playing outside, and watching the butterflies fly, and they were so pretty, and I always wanted to fly as well. And I made some friends, Cornelius Coffey and Mr. John Robinson, and they increased my interest in aviation and made me feel like it was possible for my childhood dreams to come true. But to fund these dreams, I had to have some jobs. So I didn't find any teacher's jobs, but I did work in public service. I worked as the secretary to the director of the Chicago Relief Administration. I worked as a social worker for the Cook County Bureau of Public Welfare. I worked as a clerk for the U.S. Department of Immigration and Naturalization. I worked as a clerk for the United States Postal Service, and I worked as a secretary for the renowned sociologist and activist columnist Horace Clayton. He did some work on black folks in Chicago, working black folks. That's pretty interesting. So as my career progressed, so did my hobbies in flying, and I started flight school in 1934 at the Chicago Aeronautical University. And so my childhood dream was closer to being realized. Within a year or so of flight lessons, I had earned my master's mechanic certificate, joined the Challenger Air Pilot Association, and started my master's degree in business administration at Northwestern University. To encourage others to follow their dream, it was important to me to share all I could about black aviators and to get the word out. So I contacted the editor of the Chicago Defender newspaper and informed him about all these Negro pilots and black aviators and about an air show that we had coming up. So I wanted him to come and bring his crew and get some pictures and show the rest of the world what us black folks had been doing. I had 30 aviators, 30 pilots who would be flying, and this was men and women who were going to be flying in this air show. And he agreed to come, and he brought his photographer, and he documented the air show. Almost 300 people also showed up to our air show. I was so excited with the outcome of the paper that I took the editor on a plane ride. And I flew him, and I flipped him, and I dipped him, and I did all things, and he was fearful for his life. But when we landed, he, as well as the rest of the world, gained a new respect for black pilots. And that was important to me to advocate for myself. And in 1937, I became the first black woman to be licensed as a private pilot in the United States. Because you guys know back then, things were segregated. There was black pilot schools, there was black pilots, and there was white schools. And black pilots weren't allowed in the United States military at that time. So that was something that was super important to me because I felt that black people and black pilots were just as capable as white pilots. So I wanted to advocate for us. I started and organized the National Airmen's Association with my former instructor, Cornelius Coffey. And as my flight skills and progressed, so did me and Mr. Coffey's relationship because we later married. We wanted to promote blacks in the military. We also co-founded the Coffey School, the Cornelius Coffey School of Aeronautics, the first black-owned and operated private school to educate black pilots to learn how to fly. I'm really still upset to this day in death that that did not have my name in the title. That's really frustrating that it was named after him. But one thing that I'm most proud about this school is that as the director of the school, I was responsible for training up to 200 of the Tuskegee Airmen, if you have heard of them. I'm also frustrated that they didn't put me in that movie. You know, we've had a lot of progress, even into this day. It amazes me that I still inspire people to be first in their communities. But despite the progress in my lifetime and beyond, it's still frustrating at times. And I reached out to the First Lady of the United States, First Lady Roosevelt, in 1941, and I said this to her: "During the past 3 years, I have devoted full time to aviation, and for the most part, marked progress has been made. I have, however, encountered several difficulties, Several of them I have handled well, and some have been far too great for me to handle. I took every opportunity to advocate for all people to break gender and racial boundaries, even if that meant advocating to the First Lady. At the end of World War II, I was the first black woman to run for Congress in the Republican Party. I ran in 1946, I ran in 1948, and I ran in 1950, and I lost every single time. But despite losing, I won because I encouraged others to run and be first in their communities in the future. Sad to say, my first marriage ended in divorce, but life goes on, and I remarried Reverend J.H. Chappelle, minister of the Westside Community Church, and I began working and teaching in the church and continued teaching also. I became employed at a high school there in Chicago, the Westinghouse High School, and I was able to teach aeronautics there until the 1970s. Does your high school have aeronautics? Mine didn't either, or mine, but I made that happen. Because I could fly them, and I could fix them, and I left this earthly world in 1992 at the age of 86. Throughout my life, I have carried my love for aviation and belief that the color of one's skin does not determine a person's skills or value. Each one of us can hone in skills and develop ourselves as individuals to make this world a better place for the world around us and the people in it. Our value does not come from others, but it comes from our God-given humanity. I'm a pilot, I'm a mechanic, I'm an instructor, a teacher, and a fighter for equal rights. I'm pleased with my story and my legacy, and I hope that this story inspires you to work in your community to make it a better place and leave a lasting legacy. Thank you for listening to my story today.
We got they're going to make a movie out of us in just a minute. So I don't know how we're going to manage that with as many people as we got. We got mics all over us here. The trouble is I can't see anything. I can hear, but I can't see. I'm going to go ahead and start my talk, okay? My name is Franklin Durwood Haynes. I was born April 3rd, 1901, and I've hated my name Durwood ever since. The thing about it is I've learned that it's a great asset to go out in the business world when you got a unique name. So I don't feel bad about it anymore. When I was still a young fella, my father bought a farm with dairy equipment on it over in Henderson. And he had it in mind that I was going to be the manager of his dairy. But I had in mind I wanted to play piano. So finally my mother got involved in it, and I was okay to go ahead and study the piano, but he wouldn't buy one. So that we had to learn on the next door neighbor piano, and we had to trade out some dairy products, I guess. But when I graduated from high school in 1918, I took off and signed up to study organ and piano at the University of Southern California. So I got a good education, but I nearly starved to death. I'd have a few gigs for music every now and then, or I was waiting tables, but it just didn't work out well enough, so I came back to Kentucky. And during the Roaring '20s, I was traveling with a four-man group, a men singer group that performed in the speakeasies all over the southern United States. And we did pretty well till the Depression hit, and then nobody had any money to go get entertained about anything. Somewhere in that period, Bruce Aspley, who owned the Trigg Theater and later built the Plaza, he decided he needed somebody to freshen up the silent movies. So he hired me to come in and make sort of a sound effects approach to music. And you know, I tried real hard, but there'd be in a cowboy movie, let's say, a Western, and there'd be somebody draw, you know, and they'd shoot or threaten to, and I'd be back there by the piano and I'd go dun dun like this. Well, that lasted for about half a year, and finally I couldn't stand it anymore, so I quit. And about that time there was a pretty girl moved into town named Patricia McParland, and I took to courting her, and finally we got married. And her parents owned a farm down in Winchester, Tennessee. So we moved down there, and I scratched around, worked in the furniture store a little bit. But then World War II came along, and I was too old to be drafted. So there was some kind of deal with the government where they had a program where you could work for the government without being in the military. So they sent me to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, to a nuclear research facility. Well, you know, that's a far piece from learning how to play the piano. But he must have done all right, because they kept him there for 2 years till the war was over. Then Bruce Aspley came in the picture again. The Aspleys always been real kind to our family. The thing about it was the Baptist Church wanted me to come back and be their regular organist. And I really didn't want to do it, but both Bruce Aspley and the family that owns the old planing mill, they twisted my arm. And the planing mill people said, if you come back, we'll build you a new house and you can live in it with no rent or anything. Well, that suited me just fine. So we did it, and my bride was expecting, so she stayed at the farm in Tennessee, and I stayed at the rooming house that used to be across the street from St. Helen's Church. Mrs. Knuckles ran it. When I was going across there one day, where it had been raining, I stepped on a leaf and I fell and I broke my arm in 2 places. And after that, I never could get the tone back in my arm, and I didn't, rather than be a bad performer, I decided that I would take up teaching the piano, which I did, and I taught for 40 years, mostly young folks. I loved every minute of it. When I retired finally from the Christian church, which is where I worked the last few years of my career. But when I got ready to retire in 1970, Charlie Honeycutt had salvaged all the flutes, or all these flutes, out of the built-in organ at the Christian church. You know, this church was up on the high end of the square, if you don't remember it. So when they presented this thing to me at my retirement, I was quite taken and teared up, and I made sure that my family knew I wanted this to be left for the museum, for the same group of people that we're out here helping support tonight. So thank you very much for listening to me. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
So I'm Jenny Jean Jones, and I'm here to tell you a little story about myself as a librarian and how I've come to live in Glasgow. So I was born in 1883 in Glasgow and grew up in Glasgow. My husband is also from Glasgow. His name's Vincent Jones. He's a pioneer family of Glasgow as well. And I'm a librarian, so I like to read and travel and study and learn about the history of Glasgow. So I'm going to give you a little information on how the library started. We first started in the Orr drugstore in 1916 with very few books. The cost to be a member of the library was $3.20 back then, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it was back then. And then we kept growing, books kept coming in, people kept donating books. We had women who would bake hams and sell them to get the library, to get money for them. So we kept growing, so we finally went to the Dory Terry Folk Room store and got bigger and bigger. And then there was a fire, so we had to find a new place to go. So we were in a store, in a grocery store in a little room, and it kept getting so much bigger that we finally got our own place on the College Street. And then in 1944, Dr. Welborn and his wife donated some money to the library and wanted to name it after his mother, Mary Weldon. And then in 1954 is when we got support for the bookmobile. And it went to 47 rural schools from Etoll to Park City. That's 47 schools and kids that got books that they normally probably wouldn't ever be able to see. And then in my retirement from the library, I retired at the Hall Place, which is now an inn, and it was built in 1852. It was a grand old home with so many rooms near so many churches, and I got to hear beautiful hymns throughout Sunday evening from each church. And it's so crazy to know that I went from, in my lifetime, from horseback riding to automobiles, from candle, oil lamps, and electric lights. And I just want everybody to take the time to enjoy their lives and learn about the history of their town. Thank you.